What's up, everybody? Nate here. Well, it looks like the world, our economy, and markets are about to enter crisis mode, as the situation on the Russia-Ukraine border is only getting worse by the day. In fact, as of February 22nd, 2022, Russia has actually sent some troops into the Ukraine country. And now experts and countries around the world are gearing up for an all-out war between Ukraine and Russia, including the stock market, which has tanked ever since this entire crisis began. But now it's starting to drop even worse by the day. And while this Russia-Ukraine situation is definitely one of the big parts why the stock market is tanking right now, it is definitely not the only reason why the stock market is starting to dip in 2022. There are a ton of different factors affecting the stock market right now. It just so happens that there's kind of the perfect storm for a stock market crash. So today I want to talk all about what is happening with the stock market right now and what is going on with the Russia-Ukraine situation and why that and many other things are going to make our stock market explode in 2022. But before I get into all of that, do me a quick favor and hit, smash, or destroy that thumbs up button below and ring that notification bell too. Those two things are completely free and they help to show me that you like this video and that you want to see even more just like it. And really quick before we go, you might have noticed a few things are a little bit different on this channel now. Nate Gregory is going to be the new name of Minority Mindset News. Now, nothing is changing on this channel in terms of content. I'll still be putting out 7 videos every single week, breaking down all of the top business and financial news for you. But this change allows me to bring a lot of unique and creative changes to the business and financial world news space. And I'm super excited to do so, and don't worry, I am still a part of the Minority Mindset team. Turns out I just could not turn away that guac. I'll have a few more updates for you in the coming days and weeks, but for now, stay tuned. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk all about the stock market and what's crashing it right now. So the first thing that we have to talk about here is the Russia-Ukraine situation. Now, I want to put this out at the very forefront of this discussion. This situation is bad for everyone. It's bad for markets, but it's also bad for human life. This is a terrible situation. I mean, there's nothing good that could possibly come out of Russia invading Ukraine, and my thoughts are deeply with the Ukrainian people right now. And I want to make this abundantly clear. While the Ukraine-Russia situation may cause a lot of money to be lost in the stock market and in the wallets of countries around the world, nothing is going to be worse than the potential loss of human life that could be coming soon. It's scary, and I'm just an outsider looking in here. I cannot even begin to imagine what the Ukrainian people are feeling right now. But I hope that a diplomatic solution can be found soon, so that way we can go back to talking about silly things on this channel like Elon Musk getting sued or toilet paper again flying off the shelves. But overall, though, it looks like the Russia-Ukraine situation is nearing a climax because Russia recently sent a number of troops into the Ukrainian peninsula as it recognized 2 parts of Ukraine as independent. Now, what's actually happening right now is there's 2 parts of Ukraine that have hundreds of Russian sympathizers, and Russia is basically saying that they are accepting this viewpoint and are sending troops into those parts of Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, is doing this for 2 reasons. For one, he's saying that these Russian sympathizers are actually stuck in Ukraine and they want to get out and be a part of Russia, but they can't do that because of the Ukrainian government. Number 2, there's a lot happening right next to the Ukrainian border, which borders Russia, and Russia doesn't want anything bad to happen right now, while it's still working on some diplomatic solutions with the United Nations, Europe, and the United States. When situations are as heated as this one is, one misstep could potentially send these 2 countries into war. Now, ever since this has started happening, though, markets and the stock market in particular have done nothing but tank. And the reason for this is because investors are starting to pull their money out of the New York Stock Exchange. They are afraid about what's going to happen in Russia. And it's not just a Russia-Ukrainian war that they're afraid of. It's the amount of commodities and investments that are over on the other side of the world that are spooking investors. Russia is the global leader in a ton of different commodities, including natural gas, oil, wheat, coal, copper, and nickel. All of those that I just listed are a major part of the United States economy and the economies of the rest of the world. Many businesses rely on a ton of those materials in order to create and produce things. On the flip side, natural gas and oil are used as energies in the United States. Ukraine and Russia were to enter a conflict, then more than likely Russia would no longer be allowing those shipments to go across the world, which means all of those economies would have to fall back on a lot of the other producers in the world. The major reason there is because we can expect a ton of different economic sanctions to be put on Russia the second they start invading the Ukraine. And already we're starting to see the United Kingdom put sanctions on Russia, even though they technically haven't invaded the country yet. Russia is likely to fire back and put its own sanctions on the United States, which could be just making it more expensive for the US to get a lot of those goods and services, or it would completely block them altogether. Now, what that's going to do is cause inflation to go up even more. We've seen how the stock market reacts to an inflation report that continues to set record highs, but it's going to go up even further if Russia invades Ukraine, with some experts saying that inflation could hit 10% sometime very soon. That's the highest we've seen in well over 40 years. Right now, inflation is at around 7.5%, and it could get worse if the United States actually enters that conflict itself. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be a direct war between Russia and the United States, but the United States is heavily backing the Ukraine right now, and they may send a ton of economic resources to the Ukraine in order to help them fight Russia. That means more money printing from the Federal Reserve and more money in circulation all throughout the world, including the United States. But it also means that our supply chains are going to have another big hurdle to cross in 2022. How are businesses and suppliers going to actually start creating more goods and services for people to use if everybody is blocking those resources from getting shipped around the world? Well, there's not really much that we can do. Things are going to continue to be scarce, and the price of everything is going to go up even more for consumers and producers alike. And this whole Russia-Ukraine situation could get even worse because right in that region of the world is where a ton of gasoline and oil is produced. Like I said, Russia is one of the biggest producers of oil in the entire world. If they start setting up embargoes and sanctions on a ton of other countries around the planet, well, then that could essentially send the price of oil to well over $120 a barrel. Right now, a barrel of oil is trading at around $90 to $100. So this would be a massive increase, which means the United States could start paying way more for its oil very, very soon if Russia invades the Ukraine. And energy over the last year has already gone up astronomically when compared to 2020 and 2019. It's up by over 40% for consumers all throughout the country. And remember, oil and gas is used for way more than just fueling cars. Oil is a top resource for a ton of different industries, and we still need it to create many of the things that we use today. Now, some refineries in the United States are starting to produce more oil. The reason being is because they're not sure what's going to happen with the Russia-Ukraine situation. We do produce a ton of oil in the United States, however, not nearly enough to get to everybody all at once. It's going to take a lot more work and effort to start producing the same amount that Russia and countries in the Middle East have. And there's a potential that it could get used up a lot faster, so digging too much now could have disastrous effects for the future of oil production in the US. But like I said, why is the stock market so freaked out right now? Well, one reason is inflation. The value of our money is going to start decreasing even more rapidly if Russia invades the Ukraine. There's going to be a lot more money that is printed, and the cost of just about everything is most likely going to go up. That's going to hurt the American consumer because now they are not going to be able to buy as many things. Only way that they could buy the same things as before is if all of these companies start raising their wages rapidly, and they don't want to do that because that's just going to contribute to inflation even more. At that point, it's just an endless cycle of inflation going up, the price of goods and services going up too, and then businesses raising their wages. All that leads to is people being able to buy the same things or more, which means wages need to be raised again, and that continues pretty much forever. That could tank just about every market you can think of. It's gonna tank the cryptocurrency market because now people don't have any extra money or any money to invest in stocks or the crypto market. In addition, people are going to have less money to go out and buy things. That means all of these companies that are publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, well, they're not going to have solid earnings reports anymore. They're going to start losing money hand over fist here. So investors are starting to see that, and they're pulling their money from the New York Stock Exchange, and they're putting it into other things that are hedging against inflation, like commodities and gold, things that have universal value all throughout the world. So what exactly can be done about all of this? I mean, obviously the United States cannot control what Russia, Ukraine does, but the United States has its own monetary supply, and it has its own agencies that control the money in our country. Well, those agencies would be the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department, and lately they have not done much to help our monetary supply in the United States. You see, in January 2022, inflation hit a 40-year high of around 7.5%. In response to this, the Federal Reserve has talked about getting super aggressive with lowering inflation, which means getting aggressive on their monetary policies, raising their benchmark interest rates, and pulling just about all of the money that they've been pouring into the New York Stock Exchange and markets all throughout the world. Because remember, even before this Russia-Ukraine situation, we had a stock market that was reeling, and it was reeling because of inflation and the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has been pumping so much money into the economy that it's been super easy for investors to bet on basically whatever they wanted to. They could make super risky investments because they're not betting with their own money, they're betting with Uncle Sam's dollars. So at the end of the day, if they bet 1,000 Uncle Sam bucks and they end up with nothing, well, then they still didn't lose any of their own cash. Now though, pretty much all of that money is going to disappear by March of 2022. And we are in late February 2022. So right now we kind of have this storm brewing because the Federal Reserve is not doing enough on inflation, but they're doing just enough to kind of restrict our economy and its spending, which is ultimately going to hurt the stock market. And then they're pulling all of their money from the New York Stock Exchange, which means no more free money and no more risky bets. While the Federal Reserve hasn't actually done anything yet, when they start doing things, it's going to be catastrophic for our stock market. They may start raising interest rates by 50 basis points multiple times in 2022. So we could have interest rates go from 0% all the way up to 1.75%. That would be some of the fastest rate increases we've seen since the late 1970s. That's bad news for the stock market because while it will most likely drop inflation in the United States, it's also going to tank just about everything you can think of. It'll be harder for investors to trade on margin, and it'll be harder for them to spend money in general because now, if they make a risky bet, well, it's going to be their money on the line. So they're not going to put any money into a lot of those unproven assets. All of those tech companies and giants that have been outperforming over the last year or two, well, they're going to start slowly getting a lot less money, and those stocks could essentially tank. In fact, we've already seen this tech bubble start to burst in 2022. These were companies that were basically unproven, but they looked shiny and new to investors, so investors wanted to throw their money behind these companies. And remember, it wasn't their money, so it was a completely safe investment. Investors are not going to do that anymore, and in 2022, we're probably going to see a lot less companies launch as an IPO, including a lot of new tech startups. If it's super risky to launch as a public company, then companies are not going to do it. They're going to continue to stay private until they can launch as a public company and get a lot of support. With free money going away and interest rates starting to rise, it is not a good time to launch your IPO. In addition, this is going to mean that millions of Americans are basically cut out of the housing market because now interest rates going up so high and so fast nobody can afford to get a mortgage because a 1.75% increase could mean spending hundreds of extra dollars every single month on your mortgage. Nobody can afford that right now because inflation is going through the roof. Not only that, but Americans can't budget for a new home. Americans can't pay a lot of their payments that they could before because now they have to start paying more for all of their goods and services. And not only that, some mandatory payments that were paused by the United States federal government in 2020 and in 2021 are going to start resuming very soon, including federal student loan payments and rent for millions of Americans. That could lead to foreclosures, which could lead to housing prices essentially tanking, and we already have super limited inventory to begin with. So the housing market is in a really delicate state right now. But stimulus for everybody has ended too. And I talked about this in a previous video, but credit card debt is going up in the United States. Americans are trying to replace a lot of that stimulus with credit cards and personal loans and money that they can spend now and eventually pay off later. Credit card debt is all on an adjustable interest rate. So as the Federal Reserve raises its interest rate, Americans are now going to have to pay more on that debt. Anybody that got an adjustable rate mortgage over the last 2 years is now going to have to pay more on their mortgage. So like I said, the world and our economy is in crisis mode right now. And there's not really much the federal government and the Federal Reserve can do about it. Even if the Federal Reserve is slow to tackle inflation, which I think they're going to be, and it starts to go down and businesses start to make more money. Problem is, if Russia invades Ukraine, prices are still going to go up for a variety of different industries. Federal Reserve can't control that. The only thing they can do is restrict people even more in the US economy. But that's not really going to help because it's an outside force that's causing a lot of the problems. So there's not really a solution to any of these problems. Inflation is most likely going to continue to rise in the United States for factors that are outside of the Federal Reserve's control. Our supply and demand issues are going to continue to go up, and the stock market is most likely going to continue to tank because investors right now are scared. They're getting their money out and holding on to it because they don't know what's going to come next. They'd rather keep their money instead of losing it every single day. And most investors have done nothing but lose over the past few months. So here is exactly what you need to know. There's a lot of doom and gloom going on right now. I mean, I am hopeful that Russia and Ukraine can come to some kind of diplomatic solution that does not cause, one, loss of human life, and two, loss of money for millions of people throughout the globe. The stock market and markets crash. Sometimes it's because of wars. Sometimes it's because of the things the United States does. And sometimes it's just because some companies have made some bad business decisions. Everything kind of goes in cycles. And what you need to remember is right now we are in a cycle that is coming down. Over the past 2 years, markets, assets, and people's finances have gone up to an all-time high. There has been so much free money that has been poured into our economy. It was pretty impossible for anything other than that to happen. With the stock market continuing to go up and setting record highs, now it's slated to come back down, and a natural come down from what happened back in 2020. Stock market crash of 2020 was the fastest stock market tank we have seen in pretty much the stock market's history. What's happening right now, though, is kind of a slow burn because things are just getting worse and worse, and investors are starting to realize that. Nothing can continue to go up forever, so you need to prepare yourself and your finances right now. With all that being said, though, I think the United States and our world economy in general is kind of headed for a massive shift. It seems like over the past 2 years, everything has been kind of building and building up, and now things are ready to explode because not only do we have the Russia-Ukraine situation, we have inflation and the anti-work movement and Great Resignation and supply chain issues and markets that are in a bubble right now. Nothing is kind of standing on its own, though. Everything is kind of being pushed up by the federal government right now, and when a lot of that money and interest rates start to disappear, well, you're going to see things start to go down. And what it ultimately comes down to is if we're going to see a soft landing or a complete crash. But a lot can be said about capitalism and our United States economy right now. US economy and the way that our economy is structured is pretty old, and the way that it's been functioning has been going up and up every single year. And when we have these crashes in our economy, they seem to just be getting worse every single time. And they seem to be happening more frequently and more frequently. And with that being said, nothing can go up forever. Something's gotta give in our economy. The only way that we're gonna solve a lot of these problems for now and in the future is if we change how our economic system functions. So hold your breath, because the rest of 2022 is gonna be a wild one. But now I wanna hear from you on this issue. What do you think about the stock market continuing to tank because of inflation, the Russia-Ukraine situation, and the Federal Reserve? Do you think the stock market is going to crash completely in 2022, or do you think it eventually will continue to set record highs like we saw over the last 2 years? Whatever your thoughts are, leave a comment below before you go. But that is it for today's business and financial news breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date with all of the top business and financial news from around the country, our team puts together a free daily newsletter, and you can subscribe to it by clicking the link in this corner right here. And if you want to stay up to date with me and everything else that's happening in the business and financial world, I'm putting out uploads every single day, and I've actually got one ready for you right here that you can check out, so be sure to do that before you go. Thank you so much for watching, be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.